Anyway, may I just see a show of hands? How many students are here from Spanish?
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah.
How many students are here from Italian?
Of course.
All right, yay. How many students are here from French? Great. How many students are here from German? Great. How many students are here from Chinese? Any? How many students are here from Japanese? Oh, sort of? Yeah, right. Okay. Yes, okay, great. Anyway, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Ben Karl, a native of upstate New York, who fell in love with languages at an early age. Upon receiving a bachelor's degree in French translation and East Asian studies from McGill University in Montreal, Canada, he moved to China for 2 years to pursue intensive Chinese studies at the Beijing Language and Culture University. After entering the translation industry in 2011 as a project manager at TransPerfect, a large multinational translation company, he decided to start his own translation business in 2013. He is certified by the American Translators Association for French to English translation and has an MBA from University of Nevada, Reno. He specializes in financial and corporate document translation with a focus on financial and non-financial reporting, corporate communications, and marketing. When not nerding out on translation-related topics, is that what you're going to do today, Ben?
That's exactly.
Okay. You can find him on the beach, in the garden, or on a plane.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, Ben Karl.
Well, thank you all for being here. And like this, the technology. I wish I'd gotten here earlier, and I apologize to kind of work this out because this should be like centered. So, you know, can't cry about it. And I can't see my notes either, so I'm kind of flying, sort of blind, but we'll, you know, go with it. So, I mean, thank you all for taking time to be here. I know it's Friday, and that you're like. Some of you probably don't have class today, and you're just like, you know, you're here to hear me, and I really appreciate that. And just want to, you know, thank you for taking the time, because this is something that I obviously am very passionate about. I've made it my career. And so I have a bunch of information that I think you'll find interesting, but I kind of want to, you know, the talk is conversation, right? So I want to leave enough time for us to do that. And so if you have anything that you want to ask or talk about, you can hold it till the end, and we will hopefully have ample time to cover anything and everything you would like to talk about. So here I am. I speak French, Chinese, and English, so those are my languages at the top. I do have an MBA from University of Nevada, Reno, and I am an ATA certified translator. So in addition to my little bio, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got to where I am, my kind of like my language path, as it were. There's no right way to become a translator. There's no right way to kind of find your way into what I do. A lot of people come about it from a lot of different angles and paths. Some people pursue it as their first career. Sometimes it becomes a second career for a lot of people. So I want to talk about how I came here, and that'll hopefully give you a better idea of who I am and why I'm doing it. So, like I said, or you know, like my bio said, I fell in love with language really early on. My parents have stories of me just like copying words that I didn't know or couldn't read in languages that I didn't know, just on notepads when I was little. Like I was just very fascinated with writing systems and communication and language in general. And I grew up in a very small town, Cooperstown, New York. Do any of you know Cooperstown, New York? Baseball fans will know Cooperstown, New York. It's where the Hall of Fame is. It's where James Fenimore Cooper's novels take place also. So it's kind of a weird little...
There's a little tidbit.
Yeah, weird little hamlet of about 1,800 people in a very rural part of upstate New York. But I was lucky that Rotary International, which is a really amazing organization, they have a very active youth exchange program where I grew up. And so I was able to be a Rotary Youth Exchange student for a year in high school in Mayenne, France. I did an extra year of high school there, kind of a gap year between high school and going to university. So I was completely immersed in French language and culture in a very rural part of France for a full year. And then I enrolled in McGill University in Montreal. I studied, the French language department was an entirely French language department. They didn't have classes in English at all. They didn't have even English descriptions of the courses. There's a French is the second language department and the French is the first language department, and I was in the first language department. So my degree is in Lettres et Traduction Française, which is French humanities and translation. So I studied literature, translation, French linguistics, translation theory, and mostly just literature and then translation on top of that. And then after I finished that, or an EAS, East Asian Studies. So I did a double major and I started learning Chinese at McGill. And I wanted to get better at Chinese and having the equivalent of 4 years in a university setting is just simply not enough. You are not capable of much. So I was like, okay, I need to go to China. I had a scholarship. I enrolled in the Beijing Language and Culture University. And I was taking intensive Chinese courses, about 30 hours a week for 18 months. So full-time job, I was teaching English on the side, trying to travel, trying to meet a lot of people and explore China. So hearing what's going on there right now has been really tough and awful, and I hope anyone who knows anyone who's there, or if you have family or friends, that they're all okay. So I studied in China for a long time, and then in between getting my certificate and doing my Master's of Business Administration, I worked at TransPerfect Translations, which is now the largest translation company in the world by revenue. They are based in New York. They have offices all over. So I worked in-house for them for 2 years, and then I decided to break out on my own and start my own business because it was what I originally wanted to do anyway. I did that for several years, and I am still doing that, but then I also decided that I wanted an MBA, one, to run my own business better, and the types of documents that I was starting to specialize in were related to business and commercial field, finance, annual reporting, extra financial reporting, things like that. So having a graduate degree in my subject matter was very important to me, and that's really almost more important than having really good language skills, foreign language skills. Having really amazing source language or target language skills, the language you're translating into, is incredibly important. And so having that was a signal to potential clients that I think has been very useful, and just for my own personal development and knowledge, it's been really very helpful and really great. And then a couple years ago, I decided that I wanted to do the ATA certification exam, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. There is no national credentialing body in the United States. A lot of countries do have credentialing bodies, but the United States does not. The ATA is a nonprofit organization that sort of organizes translators and has a certification process. And so I decided to do that. The tests have about a 20% pass rate, so it's a pretty competitive test. It's not recommended for students, it's not recommended for people who haven't been in the profession for a little while. And I managed to pass on my first try, which is really great. And so here we are. And if you are interested in the certification exam, I'd be happy to talk more about that later. So there are a bunch of skills that I think most professional translators have that I wanted to share with you. Because if you don't have these skills, you can work on perfecting them. If you have them, you can work on making them better. And if you think you'll never have them, you'll be like, okay, maybe I should think about a different way to use the language, the language skills that I really love to find a career in this. So, A solid foundation in translation is really important. So if you can take a degree, if you can get a degree, a minor, a major, a master's in translation, that is really helpful. Knowing the ins and outs of grammar, syntax, style differences. I mean, what you learn in a translation course is really very, very important, but it's not everything. Having a master's in translation will not make you a perfect translator, nor will just being able to, being bilingual isn't enough either. So you need exceptional target language writing ability. Do people frequently compliment your target language writing skills, whether you are a native English speaker or you're translating into another language? Do people say, wow, this is beautiful writing, you write so well, it's so clear, it's so concise, it's so whatever? If they don't, work on it. Because translating really is rendering a text in another language excuse me, perfectly in your target language. If you are not able to write perfectly and in a way that is compelling and conveys information well, then no matter how well you understand the source text, your target text will miss the mark. Subject matter expertise is super important. So you can translate in all sorts of fields. Throw out some fields that you guys know about translation.
Law.
Medical. Those are the big ones. Schools. Government. And government is like everything. I mean, the government is like a whole other world, and they've got there's defense, there's contracting, there's the environment, there's international aid, there's military, there's like nuclear weapons stuff. I mean, it's, you can't even fathom the breadth of those things. What else? Entertainment, and especially around here, that's really big. The localization industry for all sorts of content, for scripts, for subtitles, for all sorts of things. Corporate communications, multinational businesses, all of those things. So you need a solid foundation in whatever you're going to be translating in. I have a colleague who has a PhD in chemistry, and she really focuses on French to English pharmaceutical patents. So this stuff, you can't fake it. Like, if you don't. And if someone says to you, hey, can you translate this patent for me? And you're like, yeah, I'm studying translations. And you look at it and you're like, I don't know what that is. It's a whole other language. And same with a contract. Contracts can look deceptively simple, but there are really very codified ways of speaking in legalese, and same with business, and same with every field that you're in. If a specialist can be like, this person doesn't know, this person's making this up, you need to beef up your subject matter expertise. And obviously, these aren't in order of importance, but these are in order of what I thought of them. And so, source language comprehension is super important, but if you don't understand a word, you can look it up. So having perfect, flawless source language skills is less important than, I think, excellence in your target language ability, because you can look up a word. But if people who are native speakers of your source language don't compliment you on your use of the language and your ability to express yourself, work on it. Because if you can't make yourself understood, it'll be harder to sell your services to someone who's trying to buy them too. In-country experience is paramount, and I say in years, not weeks. A semester abroad is not enough.
Hello.
Semester abroad is not enough. Years are great, preferable, or regular contact. You need to have your finger on the pulse in whatever market you are targeting. The language that you are using, you need to stay up to date on what's happening there. If you are learning French right now in French translation and you don't know what's going on with the French elections right now, a client will be like, well, I'm translating something about the elections. You'd be like, what elections? And that doesn't reflect well. So knowing what's going on, having experience there, knowing where cities in all these places are, and those of you who speak Spanish or doing Spanish translation, not only is there the Spanish-speaking diaspora in this country, there's, the multitude of countries where Spanish is spoken, and needing to know the regional differences and like all the cities and like all the different stuff. Like that's huge, and you know, like it's I can barely fathom it. And like I have colleagues who interpret Spanish. And like, oh man, like today they were Cuban, and I just like could not like pick up what they were talking about, and it was so hard. But like, and then there's Chileans. It's like wow, you know. So it's like you know you have to if you want to be good, you need to live there. A natural curiosity and a desire to learn. If you aren't a naturally curious person, you'll have trouble making this career work for you. Because you have to go and look for the information, you have to go and, you know, you have to probe pretty deep sometimes to find the right answer, and sometimes the first answer you find is not the right one. So you have to enjoy looking for, I'm thinking of the French word, like you know, finding the right term, the right word, the right fact, the right way to say something, you know, because you might, you know, write something in your draft and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty good, and then you'll read it again and be like, no, that's wrong, and then you need to feel like you can reapproach things, look at things from a different way, and if you don't like that, you might not enjoy this work. Research skills. One of my big clients right now, I'm starting their annual report today. They are an industrial launderer. What's a launderer?
Someone who does laundry.
Someone who does laundry, but like on an industrial scale. And like, I didn't know anything about industrial laundries. I know about corporate communications, I know about compelling annual reporting, but I don't know like, what do industrial launderers do? So like they take soiled linens from hotels and hospitals and schools and nursing homes and all this stuff, and they clean them and they fold them and they bring them back. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business, funny enough. So I was like, well, I needed to learn about industrial laundries and like what words they use and all that stuff. So if you have a project, you need to be able to do research both on paper and on the internet, and knowing where to look, knowing how to manipulate online tools to find the information you need are very important. A healthy sense of skepticism. Clients say things that are wrong all the time. Their documents are sometimes rife with mistakes. And if you're a good translator, you will help them point them out so that they can put their best foot forward, and your translation will be correct. Because you don't want to reproduce an error if it's going to potentially make a client look dumb, or you know, they misspelled their own name at some point. You're just like, well, hey, you know, on page 4, you missed the blank, you know. So don't take, you know, what's face value for face value. Like, same with research skills, being able to probe, being able to think critically about things is very important. An entrepreneurial spirit. You know, if you're a freelance translator, especially, you're a business owner, you need to be comfortable networking with people, selling your services to people, finding niches that are underserved or could be served better, pitching your services, explaining your value, what value you add, things like that. And so if you are uncomfortable with that, take a business course. The SBDC, the Small Business Development Center Council, almost every city has one. They offer courses on business, on starting businesses. I'm sure you could find a business student on campus who'd be like, hey, let's talk about business, you know, because business students like doing that, in my experience. And if you're like, hey, like I have an idea, like help me find a way to pitch that or whatever. You know, there are ways to learn entrepreneurship and business skills without getting an MBA. And so you don't have to do what I did, you know, to go, you know, if you want to do medical translation, you don't need to get an MBA. It'd be better if you got a medical writing degree or nursing prerequisites or something like that. And then customer service acumen. The customer's not always right, but sometimes you have to bend your own rules in order to make them happy. And if you're not willing or able to do that, that can be a problem. Sometimes clients want really wonky things left in their reports, and you're just like, okay. You know, I'm making it known that I think that's a bad decision, and so if someone's like, hey, that was a bad decision, I'll be like, see, I told you, you know. So I think that's important. So a brief little overview of the industry as a whole here. These are just like the bare bones basic facts, because there's so much and people don't really think about it, but really the global market for outsourced language services, so that is every company that is purchasing a service from someone else who doesn't have an in-house service team. So say, this is just an example and I'm not sure exactly how it works there, but say Kaiser. Kaiser is a massive healthcare network and organization. It would make sense that they have in-house English to Spanish translators because the volume that they deal with is high enough that they could easily employ someone to do it all the time, all day long, all the time. That isn't included in this. So this is even, the industry is even bigger than this, but this is just outsourced stuff. So this is like what I'm in the outsourced services industry because I'm not an employee of anybody. So $46.52 billion, that's a lot of money, and it's growing. So there's money to go around. There's stuff happening. It's not $1 million industry that you have to like really, I don't know, like burn a house down to get into. Like there's stuff happening. Okay. And there are pros and cons of, especially in my line of work, being a freelance translator. I can take a couple of hours off in the morning to do fun things like this. I can take a break in the middle of the day to go to the gym or to go to the bank or to wait in line at the post office. Those soul crushing things that doing like on Saturday you're just like, oh my god. Right? Yeah, adulting. Hashtag, right? Yeah, no, it's that's really great. I work with a lot of really cool people on a lot of really cool projects, so the diversity of work is really exciting to me. I work from a home office. I have a lot of colleagues who work from co-working centers or from cafes, but like especially in LA, there's no commute, which is pretty great. And you're really doing something that you love. I wouldn't change what I'm doing for anything. I feel incredibly privileged that people are willing to pay me to do this work, and that I can earn a decent living doing it. The cons, there's a lot of downward price pressure right now. So there's, I'm not sure how much you've heard about machine translation and post-editing of machine translations. That's kind of taking over a lot of parts of the industry. So instead of being a translator, you are proofreading essentially Google Translate output, but it's more sophisticated than Google Translate. The corpuses that they use, as they're called, are much larger. The algorithms are more sophisticated. They're proprietary. So they are, it's better than reading Google Translate output, but it's still, you're not coming up with a solution, you are reading a computer's solution. And I don't like doing that, and I don't do that, but there's a lot of pressure to do that because it's a lot cheaper and it's perceived as being faster. And a lot of people are worried about how much things cost. So it makes sense that, some people would tend that way, but then others are like, no, I want to pay for a really good service. So there is downward price pressure, but there are things that you can do about that. It can be difficult to get your foot in the door. I know that that's for every industry, especially like we want 5 years of experience, but how do you get experience if you don't hire me when I have no experience? So that can be really challenging, and if any of you have questions about that, I'm happy to field those, but it can feel difficult to get started, and so that's a major con and challenge. There's no insurance or benefits. I'm lucky to be married and to have good insurance that way. And benefits. You have to save for your own retirement, for example. You have to withhold your own taxes. You have to register your business with the state and with the EDD, and withhold all your own stuff. So when you get a paycheck, you're like, okay, I need to put at least this much % away for savings so that I'm not poor when I'm old, and this is for the taxes, and then this is for everything else. So, thinking about how much you want to charge for your services. Shoot, how much do I need to live the life that I want in the market where I live? And still be able to retire comfortably and all that. Those are concerns, and those are things that you have to think about because no one's going to do that for you, unfortunately. And sometimes work can be irregular. December and January were pretty slow for me, and I was just like, hey, I'm still here. But February is the month leading into financial reporting season in France, where everyone's translating their reports and sending them to the French equivalent of the SEC, which is called the Autorité des marchés financiers, the AMF. Oh yeah, I'm glad I'm reading them because you can't see them. work can be irregular, and so if you don't have, a good, savings in the bank, like during a drier period, you might be like, okay, well, I still have to pay myself, and I have a mortgage to pay, or rent, or food, or gas, or whatever. So knowing, budgeting, making sure that you have money to get you through a drier time, or another revenue stream, or something, like all things that you have to consider, and hopefully, I've gotten to the point, I will have been freelancing for 7 years this August. I have a customer base where I don't really have super lean times, which is really great, but you have to work up to that. And for the first 6 months, you might have very little paid work. So having a contingency plan, or working part-time somewhere, or working full-time and adding it on, like there are a bunch of different ways that people go about doing it, but building up your client base is challenging, but rewarding, obviously, for the pros side, obviously. But it's saying that it isn't, if I were to say that it wasn't challenging, I would be lying. And so the typical translator, these are like, average statistics for a lot of people. A little over 90% of people are self-employed. So the era of the in-house translator, like at Kaiser or another large place that's, becoming less and less, they are much likelier to outsource, typically because they perceive it to be cheaper, which is not always the case, but they're also not paying for benefits. And so like there are all these, a give and take and all this stuff that's going on. But typically a translator will work on about 2,000 words a day translating. You can edit far more than that. But you're kind of getting an idea of the pace that's going on. So like I'm proofreading right now an annual report that will be like 140,000 words. So it'll keep me busy through March 8th. And I start today. I got the files this morning. So, that's pretty good. But, like thinking about, okay, like how much work can I take on? What can I say yes to? How quickly do I work? Because when you have a translation course and you have an assignment, you might have 4 days to do 350 words, and that's about an hour's worth of work if you're working in a professional setting. So knowing what to do, knowing where to look, making it good, and relatively quickly, because anything slower than that, it's not that it's not possible, obviously it's possible, and you can charge based on the amount of time that it takes you to do something, but that's, an industry standard is about 300 words an hour. And so if you have a week to do a translation assignment that typically would take about an hour to do in IRL, in real life, that's, practicing or thinking. So I want to walk you through just like a really, like, I don't know, typical, there's no typical day, but kind of like what my day looks like. I log in pretty early to check customer requests from Europe. 7 a.m. here is 4 p.m. in Paris, and you get really good at knowing time zones and things. So I log in, I check stuff before I eat breakfast. I'll usually have like my tea with me. I work with an editor on all of my direct client work. I work with an editor, so she right now, the one that I work with the most, she is in New Brunswick, which is a province in Canada. They're on their own Atlantic time zone, so they're 4 hours ahead of us instead of 3. So she'll have sent her comments and changes. I'll review them. I'll deliver something to a client. I'll start a new project, a bank statement, but I have a template, so I can do more than 2,000 words in a day, because I have templates of, I save the documents that I work on and I anonymize them, and then I can, plug in information more quickly, so I'm not reformatting a document every single time I work on it. I'll quit a project, I'll go to the gym, I'll come back, I'll have some lunch. I'll go on Twitter. Twitter is a really great place to connect with other translators and students. If you're not on Twitter, get on Twitter. It's a really great place. And you can follow me, and then you can follow all the people I follow. No, because there's really great stuff. There's at Translation Talk is a weekly curated account where translators and interpreters from all over the world talk about their experiences and their work and ask each other questions. And there's a really great community on social media of people that can help you, and that's a slide that I have coming up too. Later in the day, I might finish my draft. I might be translating a blog post that I'll start. I'll write some prospecting emails in the evening, and then at nighttime I might have a conference call with a professional association, or I had a conference call actually right before I got here too, just kind of. I was like, hey, gotta go, see ya. So there's days are full, but you can break them up. You can work when you have it and do other things when you aren't working. If you're, if a client has a rush project, you need to work until 2 in the morning. I mean, you're all students now. You're probably used to staying up late. I'm in my mid-30s now, and so staying up past my bedtime is like you start feeling it when you're older, and so keeping that in mind and planning your schedule appropriately. And so this is a typical day, but there's no typical day. It might be. This is just kind of giving you an idea of what a day could look like for me. And these are some typical projects. So I recently worked on a 6,000 word corporate social responsibility charter, which is businesses trying to be like, we're not so bad, we do stuff for the environment, for our community. And our shareholders like that. So we're not making as much money, but that's good. So buy our shares and stuff. A email newsletter for a hotel, and tourism and leisure is another field that we didn't mention earlier, but that you can specialize in. It's very marketing heavy, but it has a lot of specific terminology, and also you have to write in a way that makes people want to visit wherever you're talking about. A 6-page bank statement. I work a lot for people who are trying to receive loans from U.S. banks and are trying to prove proof of funds, and things like that. So hey, my French bank account has the down payment in it, here's the bank statement, so I work with banks to do that. Something for an insurance claim, someone's like, oh, there's a ding in my car, I might translate a transcript or a diploma because I'm certified. This school requires that transcripts be certified translations, so I might work with a student who's applying to have their application materials translated and certified into English. And I have, in the last year or so, I've been doing a lot more copywriting for people, which is really fun, creating content for their websites and their blogs and things like that. And I've helped launch a couple products, which is a lot of fun. So I might write an 800-word, or start drafting an 800-word piece for them, and then have my editor look at it, and then go back and forth on it. So there's work is very varied and diverse, and that's also what's so exciting about this job. Really, I love getting to do so many different things in one day or 1 week. It's never boring. I'm never even with an annual report, you're talking about receivables and payables, and you're talking about bank statements, and you're talking about bad debt expenses, but I find it fascinating that this is how companies communicate, and it's never the same, and things change, and coronavirus is wreaking havoc on the economy of China, and it's well, that's going to affect every company that has a presence in China for years to come, and that's going to be reflected in their annual reporting. And so you're okay, I don't know anything about viruses, what research, right? I need to learn about coronavirus, I need to learn about the supply chains that are affected by that. And so it's, I love it, so. All right, so this is stuff that I think would be helpful for a lot of you guys. Tools for translation students, things that if you aren't using them already, or if you don't have these are things that you can get or work on. Social media, a lot of, young people are on social media for socializing, but it's a massively useful professional tool. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, create one. Get a friend to take a nice portrait, not selfie, a portrait of you with a blurred background somewhere on campus that's really beautiful, that's well lit. Wear a nice shirt or whatever. Say I'm studying translation. This is my relevant experience, and start trying to connect with people. That's, and if not other people, connect with each other, because when you're all translators later, you'll have a network already, which is really great. Professional associations, like the American Translators Association. Full disclosure, I'm on the membership committee, so I'm always hey, you want to be a member of the team? But it is, the annual dues for a full member are about $200. I've made connections at the ATA that are worth dozens of thousands of dollars in revenue for myself. So, you know, to earn money, you have to spend a little money sometimes. And being a part of a professional association is vastly more useful than probably any other investment that I've made. And there's a discount student rate, so you can take advantage of really great student resources and all sorts of other cool stuff for a discounted rate. And even after you graduate, you can keep that rate until you've been working for a certain number of years, which is really great. Connect with each other. Fellow students and editors could be the same thing, like read each other's work, critique each other, learn to be better. You know, with your powers combined, you can be a lot more powerful and learn much more effectively than you can in isolation. Find a mentor. If that could be a teacher, it could be a professional that you meet, it could be a mentor through the ATA's mentoring program. If you're a member of ATA, you are eligible to apply for a really great mentoring program. Learn from people who you perceive as being better and more talented than you are. And being afraid of that, you know, being afraid to show them your work or to ask them questions, you know, get over that as quickly as you can, because those relationships have been really fruitful for me and have helped me just grow by leaps and bounds. So if it's, you know, find someone you admire. It could be someone in your peer group or someone who is, you know, older or more experienced, whatever. Finding a mentor is really, really great. There are a lot of translation blogs and books. Corinne McKay is the most recent past president of the American Translators Association. She's a very prolific writer and blogger, and she has several books on like getting started as a freelance translator that are very helpful and useful. Chris Durbin has one that's called, the title escapes me, but Chris Durbin, you know, she's very easy to find, and it costs like $14 on Amazon or whatever, you know, and they're very useful books. You can get a lot of really good free resources as well through translation blogs and things like that. And if you don't feel like you have a business acumen, take a business course. You know, it's low stakes. You know, you're still in school. You know, consider it. Think about it. And if you don't want to take a business course, connect with someone who knows more about business than you do. Like I said, the American Translators Association is really great, and I would not be where I am without connecting with people in that group and getting involved in that group. The most recent conference was in Palm Springs this past year. There will be one in Los Angeles in 2022, I believe. So you don't necessarily have to travel far to meet, you know, 1,500 new colleagues who could help you, or you could learn from, or, you know, continuing education, all that fun stuff. I think it's an incredibly important organization, and I believe in it like wholeheartedly. And if you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer. And then I wanted to, you know, leave a fair amount of time to actually have a conversation. And if you don't have questions, I have other things I can talk about, obviously. But I'd be more interested in hearing from all of you. And if you want to email me, my email's there, my website, my blog, which has been a little quiet these days, and my Twitter, where I'm very active. If you want to tweet me, if you want to at me right now, you can totally do that. I might take a picture of you all, actually right now, and I'll put it on my Twitter, because I think this is pretty great. So smile! Very good. Okay. So yeah, no, thank you again all for coming. This is, it's probably been a lot at one time, but I really would like to, I'd rather talk with all of you rather
Well,
than...
first a round of applause. And then please, ask all of the questions you ever wanted
Right
to
there.
ask.
I had a question. I know you mentioned freelancing, and so like you're kind of working by yourself. Are there any have other freelancers attempted to like organize or like unionize to set like industry standards to not like undercut each other as far as price points?
Right, so that's a really good question. The American Translators Association sort of acts as not a union, but it's sort of a de facto organizing body. And in the 90s, they started talking about rates sort of at the organizational level, the association level, and they were sued by the government for price fixing. So they don't talk about rates at the association level anymore. But I know most translators are willing to talk to you about what they charge. And it's actually quite easy to find out what, like say what large agencies are paying, for example. And when you start, you're likelier to work for an agency. I mean, this is totally theoretically, you might never work for an agency. But I find that if you're looking for work, it makes sense to work with a multinational agency when you're starting because they have they have higher volumes, but the pay is significantly lower than what you can earn when you are working for a direct client. Because if you imagine, from a business perspective, all businesses are charging a certain amount, and then they're marking up their services by a certain amount to pay for their overhead. So if you have businesses, or if you have if you have offices in 40 countries, you have a lot of overhead. So, like TransPerfect, where I used to work, for example, their minimum markup was 240%. So if they're charging the client one price, their entire translation budget, translation, editing, proofreading budget is significantly less than what they're charging the client. So if you think about that, you're like, okay, well they're paying me this much, they're selling the service for this much, I could go and sell the service for this much, but because right now that's difficult for me, or I'm just getting started, or I don't want to go and sell my services, I'm happy to sit at home and have someone just send me work. Like there are a lot of people who are like that as well. So figuring out what to charge, mentors are also helpful for that, but large agencies, they tell you what they pay, and there's not really much room for negotiation. They kind of set the tone. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of take it in an opposite
Please.
direction, sort of, but
Yeah.
I was fascinated from how you went from French, which is a big romance language, into
Yeah.
Chinese.
Yeah.
I can connect with this because
Sure.
we share writing systems
Very
anyway.
good. Yeah.
So I was wondering, what was the hardest part of transitioning from a romance language that has a mother origin
Yeah.
to one like Chinese where it's ideogram based,
Yeah.
and the structure is extremely different.
So different, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Chinese, it's such a funny language because like the barrier to entry is really quite high because of the tones and because of the characters, but like the grammar is deceptively simple. You don't have complex verb tenses, you don't have gender, you don't have singular and plural. Like you just, it's very contextual. It's not inflected like Russian, French, and German. Italian. English is like in the middle, like Romance languages are highly inflected, right? And then English is like sort of inflected, not really, like we add S's to things sometimes. And then Chinese, they don't do anything, like, they're just like, But when I was learning, so when I got to McGill, I had this grand idea, because I spoke French fluently already, right? So, and I was enrolled in the French as a first language department. And so I was like, okay, I want to learn another language. I feel I have a knack for this, And so I love it, it doesn't feel like work to me. Like going to school is a pleasure and a joy. Like I'm not, what can I learn that one I think will be useful, that I can kind of create a market for myself, and something that I'll actually find interesting. And so I started going to the Chinese class. It was a 5-day-week class. So it was a 10-credit course. So it was it was a big commitment and undertaking, but I really liked trying to think, like having to think in a completely different way, from French, because I was so at ease in French already. And then really having to completely take myself out of all of the stuff that I had learned already and plot myself somewhere else. It was very, in French there's a word that's dépaysant. It's de-countrying. It's like when you feel like a fish out of water, but in any situation, you know. And so like being in class, I was just like, wow, this is so cool, you know. So, and then when I got to go to China, I thought it was just it's a really incredible place. The people are amazing and lovely, and you can say all you want about the CCP and Xi Jinping and all the crazy stuff that's happening, and you know like the terrible treatment of Uyghurs and human rights abuses. I mean, like all of that aside, like the Chinese people are lovely and amazing and hospitable and warm, and the food is like oh my god, like the most incredible food you've ever eaten. And it's very hard to find equivalent food here in LA. It's easier, and we're all very lucky for that. If you want Chengdu taste in Alhambra is just amazing, so good, yeah, so good. Don't get the hot pot, you know. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, no. So I mean, does that answer your question, sort of? Like, it just was. The process was just so interesting and fun for me that I didn't really think about like how I made it work for myself. You know? Yeah.
Curious, giving advice. I'm a professor.
Sure.
I do Asian language. I'm Asian studies.
Okay.
So I speak Japanese badly. I mean, I speak it, but
Sure.
I'm what you call a not natural learner of a second language. Like it was really hard for me.
Sure.
If you're giving students advice, or all students here, how do you kind of know, like, because translation is hard, right?
Yes.
How much of it is pure raw talent, and how much is like having a good brain for language, which you seem to have, and how much do you think you can like learn as a skill?
Right.
Just your opinion, right?
Yeah, you know, so I mean, in business school, we talked a lot about mindset, and we learned a lot about mindset, and like the psychologists who study mindset, and really like there's nothing that one can't accomplish with the right mindset.
Just
And
more
so,
work, maybe.
More work, yeah, work harder. You know, like Kobe, you know, rest in peace, Kobe. You know, he didn't become the. I bet you $1 million that from age, like walking until he was drafted, he was playing basketball 12 hours a day. If you were learning a language 12 hours a day, every day of your life, you get pretty good at it. And so I really feel that, from my perspective, especially with learning a language, there is a direct correlation between effort in and effort out. And even though it might come a little bit harder at the beginning, you know, there's no way, if you're putting in the effort, there's no way to go but up. But also I think some people have, like people who read voraciously, for example, and I'm sure most academics do.
Yeah.
You subconsciously, it's osmosis, really, a lot of it, but then if you're reading in a very like focused and intentional way, you pick up ways to write that are more compelling, or words that work really well in certain situations, or you know, reading good writing makes one a better writer. Reading good translation makes one a better translator. So there are other things that you can do to you know, improve not just your rote language ability, but also your ability to transfer it into a new language.
I'll never complain about the read more answer. That is my
Right. Oh yeah. No. Read voraciously. I mean, I read all the time, and you know, I mean, I read a lot of like financial news. You know, like, and so a lot of people are like, well, that's boring. You know, but you know, knowing how people in your field communicate is paramount. You know, and then you can read for pleasure for other things. And I read the New Yorker a lot. I read a lot of short fiction from the New Yorker. Really, just like on-point journalism from those. I mean, those writers are just amazing. And like Jia Yang Fan, she's a Chinese writer, native Chinese-speaking writer for the New Yorker, who is just the most talented writer you've ever read. And she writes about China in the most compelling and interesting and amazing way. And if you're, I mean, I could gush like for hours about it, but yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yes.
Curiosity, when we're learning Chinese, did you learn simplified or traditional?
Yes. So my professor at McGill was from Harbin, China, the biggest city that most folks in the U.S. have never heard of. It's, you know, like 9 million people in northern China, capital of Manchuria. It's got a weird name, like Harbin. It doesn't sound like other. It's not like Guangzhou and Wuhan, and like I mean, it's like it sounds weird, and like it's near a city called Titihar. Like Titihar, that's so weird. So he, spoke very like Biaozhen Mandarin, like very standard Mandarin, and so we learned simplified only. Some textbooks have both. Some textbooks have, like the first year you're only learning pinyin, for example. But we didn't do that. We had a bilingual pinyin character textbook for the first semester, and then it went right to just characters. And then they would sometimes write the tones over the characters, so you could remember what tone you're supposed to say. And then if it was a brand new character that you'd never seen, it would have kind of like furigana in Japanese, where they kind of like tell you how to pronounce it under the character. They write, they tell you what it is. And so people will ask me, hey, can you, here's this document from Hong Kong, can you just translate that for me? And I'm like, no, I have never lived in Hong Kong. I don't read traditional characters, at least not quickly. So the amount of time it would take me to do a good job is not cost effective, because I charge by the hour. And so if it's going to take me twice as long as someone who can actually read it, because you can convert traditional characters to simplified online. Like there are little engines that do that for you, so you can make it easier to read. But I prefer not to do stuff like that. I've only ever lived and worked in mainland China. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk today. It was very amazing. But I wanted to ask, going from an agency to freelancing, and you say that it's hard to get started, put your foot in the door. At what point did you feel like you had your foot in the door, that your freelancing was going from here and growing?
Right. So I was anticipating this question, and if no one asked, I was going to talk about it anyways. So when I got started, I had moved. I was living in Beijing, China. I decided that I wanted to move back to the United States, and that I wanted to be in a particular state for romantic reasons. Okay? So I was like, okay, how can I live here-ish? And I was like, there's a translation company. This owned by TransPerfect. It's called Iverson Language Associates. It's based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And they had an opening for a project manager. I'm like, well, I'm gonna apply for it. And so I had a phone interview, and then I was living at my parents' house in upstate New York, and so I went to their headquarters in Manhattan for my in-person interview, and I was it was like the weirdest thing, but I got the job, and so then I moved to Milwaukee and I started PMing, as it's called. So you work with PMs, project managers, and you're PMing, and I worked for them for 2 years. But so I had a degree in translation already, but I felt that it was very theory-based, and I didn't know what a CAT tool was, for example. Who doesn't know what a CAT tool is? Have you heard the word CAT tool before? CAT stands for Computer Assisted Translation, and a CAT tool is a way to parse a document into basically a bilingual database to help you translate more efficiently. It doesn't translate for you, it helps you translate things that you've already translated in a more efficient way, saves your work, etc. So I learned all about that stuff while I was PMing and team leading, because I ended up managing a little group of folks. And then we were relocating, and so I could have continued to PM remotely, which I was not interested in doing. My goal from the get-go was to be a translator. I studied translation. I wanted to be a translator, and so for me, it was the perfect opportunity to break out on my own. And so I had myself sort of surreptitiously qualified as a vendor before I left, because we had a vendor manager in our office. So when you're working for an agency, you'll send them your application materials. If they're interested, they'll write back and they'll say, here's a test. It's an unpaid test. This is to prove that you have that your work is up to our standard. So I had her test me before I left, which was very because I didn't have to like apply the way that a lot of other translators did. And so that was lucky for me. Like I had an in that helped me do that. And if you are connecting with people in the industry, you might get, you could get recommended by somebody. That's why networking is so important, because you never know, like the next person you meet could be the owner of a translation company that wants to hire you. So I was qualified as a vendor, and I started working really just for them. And they were my only client my first year. But even then, I made more than they were paying me when I was an employee. And I worked like a dog. I mean, I worked like crazy. And so when I wasn't working for them, I cold emailed other agencies. I started working for other agencies. I tried to get, like you're looking for clients everywhere. And if you speak a language and are translating languages like Spanish in this part of the country, you have a leg up because there's a local market for your services, whereas I was living in Reno, Nevada, translating Chinese and French into English. There was no local market. So I couldn't go and be like, hey, here's my portfolio. Oh, make a portfolio of your work too. Find texts that are in the public domain, no confidential information in them. So newspaper articles, advertisements, literature that's even in the public domain. Because you can translate any book that's in the public domain, you can translate without getting rights to it. Like you can't translate Harry Potter because those are, heavily guarded copyrights. Create a portfolio of your work and show it to people, and show it to potential clients. Be like, this is what I'm capable of. This is work that I am proud of, that I feel puts my best foot forward, and they will be like, great or not great. And then if they're like not great, you'll be like, ooh, I need to work on this more. And so I worked, and for several years I wasn't a member of the American Translators Association. When I joined, that really started to help, because they have recruiting events at the conferences where you meet agencies that are hiring, which was really great. And then I met other colleagues who, when they're too busy, they subcontract. They have become my editors. They have referred me to other clients, like when their clients are very busy. With French financial reporting, like if you want to specialize in French financial reporting, there's typically, especially this time of year, there's a lot of work. And so if you're good, you can, I'm booked through mid-March right now. So, you can get recommended, and those are connections that you make through networking. So when I started doing that, I really felt like, I was like, oh, okay, this is really working for me, this is really great. And, this last year I hit a revenue goal that I had set for myself, which is really great. I'm trying to, you try to grow your revenue by 5 to 10% at least every year, because, inflation's 2%, so if you're not making 5% more than you were last year, you're actually losing money. So, business. And then this last year I joined the French American Chamber of Commerce in LA, which is really great. Their dues are really high. So it shows the people that you're meeting that you mean business and that you are there. And like if you're not making money to start, that's not, like joining the Chamber of Commerce might not be your first goal. But if you want to meet people, it is a goal that you should eventually set for yourself, because that's where people who are buying are, and they want to do business with people that they know. And if they don't know you, you could be the best translator in the world, but if no one knows you, and writing a cold email is not the same as meeting someone in person. Does that answer your question? Great. Did you have a question?
I just wanted you to talk a little bit what you were just saying, like the importance of networking.
Oh my God. I know people who are like, oh, like I finally joined my, even in an industry that's not translation. I met a woman who was trying to break out as a copy editor and an indexer, which is a whole thing because academics don't want to do it when they finally get their book published. They're just like, take it, I don't want it. Because like you have to read the whole thing and like find all the keywords and all that stuff, and you index. It's like it's a laborious process. She was trying to break into doing work like that for academic publishing. And she was, working for like a year, and she was like, no, it's not working. And then she joined a professional association. She's like, oh yeah, like the day after I joined, I got a $1,000 contract. And I was like, what were you waiting for? Like you have, like networking, when you're able to, joining a professional association, you know, like if you could like get your parents to get you a gift, you know, like a holiday gift of an American Translator Association student membership. I think they cost like it's less $89. Thank you. I was like, it's less than $100. You know.
I trust
You know, it's less than some of your monthly phone bill, right? But it is such a valuable resource. I cannot stress it enough. Yes, thank you. I'm just like it is. I mean, in my entire career, what I've spent about $1,000 on just ATA dues, but the amount of money, not just the amount of money, like the colleagues, the joy that it brings me. You know, like it's not just about dollars and cents. It's about having a community of people around you. And I wouldn't trade that for. I mean, I would have just paid $1,000 for it, really. Yeah. Right there, and then we'll come up here. Yeah.
Can you talk a little about when you got certified and what that process was like and how you prepared for it?
So the certification process is really, I know that a lot of people get frustrated with it because it's so hard. And a lot of people fail the tests at least once, if not twice. I know someone who, she wanted to be certified in both directions. I really recommend that you just try to be certified into your native language. She wanted to be into English and into Spanish. And the into English test, I think she took it like 3 or 4 times before she passed. And I was like, well, good on you. But like that's like nuts to me, right? So the test, I mean, like the ins and outs of the test, they've added a computerized test, which is really great because no one, you know, is flipping through dictionaries with pens and paper anymore. Like when you're doing professional work. It's a test that's recommended for people who've been translating professionally for at least 2 to 3 years. There are 3 passages that are all sort of general, but might have like one might have a sort of businessy slant, and one might have sort of you know, like they read like newspaper articles essentially. Non-specialized texts. You pick 2 and you translate them, and then they're sent to graders. It's all anonymous. And then you get just a pass or a fail grade. But there are practice tests that cost a fraction of the actual test, where you get detailed feedback. You get your scoring rubric back, you get a marked copy of your paper back. And I recommend that everyone who wants to try the certification exam do that first, because if you don't pass that, you're probably not going to pass the actual one. But if you do pass it, you have a really good chance of doing really well on the actual test. And the feedback is very valuable. And so, you know, I mean, being certified, like it hasn't like dramatically increased the amount of work that I get. You know, it's not, I mean, it is a signal to certain people, but, you know, the clients that I work for most of the time, when you say like, oh yeah, and I'm certified, they're like, oh great, like that's like the cherry on top type of thing. They're not like, oh, I will only work with certified translators, you know, because they don't care. Like they're, you know, they want their reports to look and sound good. They want their blog posts to read well. They want people to buy their products and click on their links and things like that. So, and being certified, you know, it helps, but it's not everything. And the most successful translators I know actually aren't certified. There are people that I know who have very successful translation careers who charge, you know, 2, 3, 4 times what I charge, and I'm just like and then you know, young grasshopper, you know, like I want to be you know, like, you know, and you know, you're learning from people, and that's, you know, trying to connect with them and learn from them. Like last year, I dished out $500 for an 8-hour business practices course with one of these people in San Francisco, and I was living in Reno, so I got, you know, the $150 Southwest round trip to Oakland, and I went down and I went, and it was really great, you know, like learning this stuff. I mean, it's, you know, like investing in yourself in addition to maybe having certification in your sites eventually is just as, if not more important. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I'm happy to answer any more questions about certification. I actually just wrote an article about the certification process. I wrote, this is for the Chronicle, which is the ATA like newsletter, the 12 extra linguistic skills you need to master before taking this certification exam. You'd be surprised how many people needed help saving their files to PDF. There were 19 people sitting the exam. I'm pretty sure I saved at least 12 PDFs. And you can't save a PDF? And inserting line breaks in, because you have to do it in text editor, right? You have to do it in a word processor that doesn't have a spell check because they're trying to prove that you know how to spell words good. So, and they're inserting line breaks with the enter key. And I'm like, no, don't do that. You make it double spaced because then they're like, oh, it's printing all weird. Like it's got, the margin's going like this. And I'm like, well, don't do that. So I wrote this article to be like, stop doing these things. If you want to succeed at the exam, these are things that you should learn about. So the Chronicle, I'm pretty sure even non-members can read the Chronicle. It's online, so take a look, read about stuff that's happening, going on. If you don't know who the big agencies that are in the world right now are, look them up. Who's hiring? What are they specialize in? Where are they located? Knowing what the industry landscape looks like is really important to succeed in it.
Connected to this, can I just ask you, how interested are they in the fact that you have an MBA?
My direct clients are very interested. Agencies, they have their set budgets really. So I think when I'm willing to accept work for what they're offering, they're really pleased. Because I think they, it's a symbol that I really kind of do know what I'm talking about, and that I'll take the time to make sure that it's good. But really getting the MBA was so good for me because now I know that I'm doing a good job. And so when I'm selling my services to somebody who's really discerning, I can use that, I can lead with that foot.
Yeah.
So, and you had a question.
Right. Could you talk more specifically about the Southern California job market, how competitive it is, and how can our students get prepared besides taking, courses, etc.?
So I'm new to the Southern California area. I got here in October. So, and I work remotely for clients that really aren't located here right now. And I'm really working on, I've had a couple of local jobs, but I'm working on building up my network here. I'm not sure how much you guys are aware of AB 5, Assembly Bill 5, and sort of the havoc that it has wreaked on all sorts of agencies, or all sorts of industries, including the translation and localization industries. If you don't know about it, search the hashtag #FixAB5 on Twitter, you'll find lots of fun things. And once you've learned about it, call your assembly people and your senators, because it's a law that essentially it's so complicated, and if you actually read the legislation, it's so convoluted and messed up. But it basically makes agencies afraid to work with California-based freelancers, even if they are registered as businesses, because they could, through this law, claim that they are misclassified as subcontractors when they should be classified as employees, and sue them for back pay and benefits and all that kind of stuff. So they're just like, well, there's a very large market of people outside of the state of California. Why would I work with someone in California if that were what could happen to me if I were to work with them? So there are a lot of organizations that are. Oh yeah, how much time do I have left?
We gotta wrap up by like in 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay, great. So there are a lot of organizations that are lobbying to get an exemption for translators and interpreters, and there are several bills that are in the works now that would exempt freelance journalists, freelance musicians. It's community theaters that work with freelance actors. It's like they're the extent of and breadth of the damage is wide ranging, and so in Southern California there's a much larger market for Spanish, in and out of Spanish, and a much larger market for interpreting services in Spanish and a variety of other languages. A lot of it has to do with the proximity to Las Vegas, which is a huge convention city where you can interpret in pretty much every language under the sun. And a lot of visitors who come to the LA area, Southern California, either for business or pleasure or any number of things, who need translation and interpreting services. So there is a market here for sure, but most of my clients are located elsewhere. Because with the beauty of the internet, you can work for anybody. So I think getting connected with local people is really good, but then being able to network, especially at conferences or events, with people who are from all over, that's really valuable. All right, well I think that's time, basically. But I'm available to answer other questions for you if you want to talk after briefly. My parking runs out in 30 minutes, whatever. So I'm available. You can email me, you can @ me, you can do whatever. All right, so thank you all very much.
Thank you.